makes a knight.
What?
He makes a knight.
And knight e2 and oh my
Oh
god, this is just
my
genius.
God.
This is just genius.
This is unbelievable.
Wow.
This is better than could have been imagined, honestly. This is one of the most remarkable endgames I've seen in a long time.
It's games like this that are an absolute pleasure to commentate on, to be a chess fan on. I mean, the brilliance, the tension, the genius of this endgame. In the words of Peter Svidler, it's just one of the most remarkable endgames we've all seen in a long time. Let's check this one out. It's from the Tech Mahindra League, Global Chess League. Magnus here with black, Vishy with white, legends, former world champions. Let's see what happened. So e4 from Vishy. Now we've got to get to this end game, so we're not going to linger in these opening moves too long. French defence on the board. Now knight c3, and Magnus goes for the razor sharp winnower variation. So e5 advances the pawn, c5 takes some space, a3 puts the question to the bishop, and bang, black shatters the pawn structure, gives up the bishop pair in the process, and then develops this knight to put more pressure on the centre. But here comes queen g4, pressuring that black queen king side. You've given up the bishop, right? This is the strategic battle. White's going to hammer away on black's king side. Black's going to look for counterplay over here on the queen side. So g6 protects the pawn. h4 from Vishy, looking to create weaknesses. h6 from Magnus, prepared to meet this move with this move. And now f4, you know, white doesn't hold back. Let's rip open that king side, and Magnus has to generate counterplay now. So he hits that pawn. Vishy defends, and now the only move for black here to keep in the game from a computer evaluation perspective is pawn f5. Try and close things down on the king side there. And if you try and take, rip open lines using that en passant move, well then the knight develops, also picks up a tempo on the queen. It's not the way for white to go. So the queen drops back. Magnus goes g4, happy to take a breather for a moment, shut down the king side. And now Anand here, he plays a move that looks kind of weird, but we're not going to go deep on sidelines. You can go c4, it's one option, but this is also a good move. Second top engine move, looks ugly, shattering the pawns like this, but you have vacated the d4 square now, and there's an idea to bring a knight into that rock solid square. So Magnus just develops, doesn't hurry to pick up the pawn back. We get bishop d3, queen takes on c5, knight e2, knight a5, looking at c4, also preparing to bring this bishop into the game, and queen f2 from Vishy. He offers the trade. That's a really powerful, annoying piece. Magnus captures, king recaptures, bishop d7 developing, a4 now played, and this is a nice positional idea from Vishy. That dark squared bishop's looking a bit dead. It's about to bounce round and hit that wonderful diagonal. So king f7 played, connects the rooks. Vishy now brings his rook to the b file, pressuring that pawn. We get pawn b6 played, bishop c1, going on the journey, and now a great maneuver by Magnus. Knight e to c6, and watch how this knight hops. So bishop a3, knight d8 on the board. Where's it heading? Well, bishop b4 played to pressure that a5 knight, threatened to smash up the pawn structure, and this knight hits b7, supports its brother. Knight d4, centralising, exerting influence over the board, and now a mysterious rook move. Every game needs one, right? What's that all about? Well, Magnus is obviously seeing some potential action exploding down the b file, so he brings that one across. And Vishy now drops back, pressures the knight on a5. So it hops into c4, great outpost, and here Vishy makes a committal decision, gives up his bishop pair by chopping here. And so I did a bit of clicking, you know, why do that? And you can't sit there forever as white basically. a5 is a threat. You could go a5 as white, but it starts to liquidate stuff. So okay, Vishy goes for this one, allows his knight to then plant itself on that amazing central square, and it also controls c6, so this bishop can't activate so quickly just yet. So Magnus brings the rook to the c file, a5 from Vishy, Magnus goes b5, best response to keep lines closed, rook d1 played, eyeing that unprotected bishop, and it drops back to the back rank. Knight e2 played, opens up the rook, pawn a6 supports the b5 pawn, rook d4 preparing to double, Here Magnus challenges the file, rook a d1, and a pair of rooks come off the board, and bishop c6. Finally Magnus hits that long diagonal, pressures the g2 pawn, and after rook d2, preparing knight d4, this is just awesome, super GM chess, bang, pawn g3 check. You know, Magnus knows when to just drum up that counterplay, not let white get everything they want in the centre. And the idea is, if king takes, you've got rook g8 check coming, and then crashing through here. And if knight takes, well, it is playable, but then it's really hard after rook g8 for white to make any progress. Because anytime the knight moves, that one's dropping, and it's just hard to make inroads into this black position. You know, the minor pieces cover, it's looking just draws, you know, across all the lines there that the computer shows. So Anand, he steps back with the king, doesn't take the pawn. Rook g8 anyway from Magnus. Knight d4 hits the bishop, and now rook d8 back. Great play using this pin here. Magnus is just kind of holding on by a thread here, or else white could start to really invade the position with the wrong sequence of moves. But okay, Magnus fighting back. Bishop d6. Now there's a tricky move from Vishy, because if you take, then there's this Zwischenzug of knight takes on c6, hitting the rook, hitting the knight. You know, if okay, rook's attacked, if you go rook d7, well, then you can take here, or take with the pawn, you know, take your pick, you're just a piece up. So after bishop d6, Magnus doesn't take, he goes bishop e4, we now see bishop back to b4, and rook d5 centralizes, Magnus goes king Vishy, sorry, goes king f1, mixing up the players. Now, he's looking to run his king to support that rook, then he can move this knight. There's still a pin there. So knight d8 now from Magnus, we get king e1 supporting the rook, knight c6, and now this one drops back. We see the rooks exchange. It does mean that this pawn is now on prise. After captures, now Vishy takes here, restores the material, and bishop f3. Completely level endgame. Zeros when you run it with the computer, but there's still a lot going on here. King e3 hits the bishop. It comes down here, attacks the pawn. King back. Does Magnus repeat? No. He's pushing for a win. He wants a W for his team. Plus it's worth 4 points in this format when you're playing with black. So we get king e3 played, king e8 from Magnus, king d2, and now knight e7, looking to hit that d5 square where the knight will be a monster, also hitting this pawn, and so that one's chopped off. King recaptures and king c1. Now the eval bar doesn't like that move of king c1. It says go king e3 or knight e2. Okay, not so bad from Vishy. I mean, he still has drawing lines here, as we're going to see. So Magnus brings in the king. Vishy's shuffling around here. We get to a position in a moment after king b2 where Magnus could now already initiate these pawns running on the queen side. But here's the problem. After captures, king takes, pawn c3 check. Yes, you win this pawn. You've got the running a pawn, but how do you actually make progress? Because this knight does an amazing job of blockading the e4 square. The pawn covers here and here, so all this king has to do is cover the a file. And when you start running lines, you know, black can't actually make progress because you always kind of go between these three squares. You can never make your way in. You can never move that one out of the way. You know, the bishop can't ever check the king out of the way. If it comes to b1, it will get taken, etc. So it's just a drawn position. So that's why b4 not played. Magnus goes bishop d1, king c1, bishop back, king b2. Are we going to repeat? Well, bang, b4 check from Magnus. Hang on, we just showed this should be a draw. But is he taking the pawn with the king? No. He's going king d4. Look at this. c3 check. He allows Vishy to establish this chain just to invade with his king. And he even lets Vishy now go pawn b5. Takes, pawn a6. How dangerous does this look? Yes, the bishop's still on the square right now, but things are dangerous. There's also ideas of knight takes here, pawn takes, this one running, overload the bishop. So king d2 now played by Magnus, and that's a key idea, just to show you this one, because you want to go b4, and after say takes, then goes c3 check and run this down the board. But the problem is, if you do it too soon, the white king steps back to c1, it can never be evicted, you've got no dark squared bishop, that's a blockade, and now here white's winning, you know, the knight's going to sack there, the pawn runs, there's also this one coming, no good. So that's why king d2, you have to control the c1 square before you go b4. And now here Vishy, he goes pawn a7, Magnus starts with bishop to d5, and this is where Vishy misses a draw on the spot. So what you should do here to instantly draw it is knight f1 check, with the key idea that you're driving the king away from the d2 square. So if you come back here, we come back here, you're just repeating. And if you come back, check, and then try and run the king this way, attack that knight, well now look at the eval bar. You've gone too far. Bang, white takes on f5, pawn recaptures, and this one's running. And the bishop is overloaded, chasing both of these pawns, plus if black does this now, well, you're getting nowhere without the support of the king over here. So knight f1 check, the way to go, but it was missed. We see knight takes on f5, played instead. Pawn recaptures and e6. Vishy's got this amazing idea now of running the pawns, but Magnus goes for the counterplay now with pawn b4. Now the climax of the game is coming, but I do have to briefly pause here because I need to tell you about an exceptional chessboard which is on the way. So it's called Go Chess. It's made by a company called Particular, and this thing is a market leading product. You can do voice control to move the pieces. The pieces move by themselves. You can set the board up from puzzles, previous games, just instantly with the click of the button. You can pause the positions that you were at and then come back to them later. Play against people online. Honestly, it's just the most insane product I've ever seen, and the price point is amazing right now. Because it's still being developed, coming out early next year in April I believe it is, you can get an amazing price locked in now, way cheaper than it's going to be when it actually comes out, but you literally have to hurry on this thing because the prices will be going up soon, and when it gets released, well then it's going to be at full whack, paying a lot for this amazing product though. So check out the link below, watch the video on their page, get some more details, and lock in one of these fantastic products before it goes on the market in April next year. Okay, back to this exciting game here. So Magnus has just played pawn b4, Vishy goes e7, of course, looking to overload that bishop, and now here we see takes on c3 check and king a2. So this is a fascinating move. What has Vishy foreseen? Because he's gone deep on this already. Well, this pawn here controls the b3 square. So now, when black pushes this pawn on twice, makes a queen, well, if you imagine both of these pawns gone, white can't move either of these pawns here, then this king will be in stalemate because this square is controlled, queen is made and covers these squares. This is what Vishy's playing for. So pawn c2 from Magnus, a8 queen from Vishy. You have to queen with that one first because you have to distract this bishop away, not allow c3, discovered check. Now this one makes a queen, and here Magnus, he goes wrong with his move, but it's so tough under time pressure. So what should black play? Well, pawn to c3. With the key point that you're no longer controlling this square now, you get rid of the stalemate ideas. But it does allow white to start checking the black king. But amazingly, after the king steps here, if the queen checks again, well, the bishop can interpose from afar, save the king from checks, and they just run out. You know, you can check down here, but king d1, check back, but king e2, the checks run out, the pawns are going through, just a fascinating study-like kind of endgame position. So coming back here, c3 the way to go, but Magnus starts with bishop e4, you know, looking to bring this one around the king, protect it from checks. But this allows Vishy a draw. He finds a great starting move, queen d8 check. The bishop blocks that check, but now he just goes wrong by going queen to d4. But it's so tough to see why that's an incorrect move. What should he do? Well, queen b6. But we're going to see why when we click down this variation. So queen d4 played with the idea that if Magnus plays the obvious, what Vishy would have calculated, creating a queen on c1. Then there's these amazing stalemating ideas by giving up the queen, and you cannot avoid that. I won't click through all the line, right? If you keep running away with the king, eventually you just get forced to take that queen. The queen keeps checking. So you have to take, and this is a stalemate. How beautiful is that, right? So that's what Vishy was playing for here. But Magnus does not make the queen, he makes the knight. This is where we get this reaction.
He makes a knight.
What?
He makes a knight.
And knight e2 and c. Oh my god, this is just
my
genius.
God.
This is just genius.
This is unbelievable.
Wow.
This is better than could have been imagined, honestly. This is one of the most remarkable endgames I've seen in a long time.
And this is just stunning stuff, right? So the king steps up the board, and now pawn c3, this one's running through. But here's the problem. Vishy is now one tempo down on a draw. He goes queen b6. But imagine earlier on, if instead of going queen d4, he'd gone queen b6, then you still would have set up the same stalemating idea with queen e3 if Magnus had made a queen. But in the event of black making a knight, now your queen would have already been on b6. Vishy's just had to spend a tempo to get it there. And now when Magnus moves the knight, Vishy takes here. Pawn c2, well, we see resignation from Vishy, because if he comes back, then the queen is made, you take, king recaptures, and the knight takes here on f4. This is key. Pawn h7, knight g6, and you just get to the pawn in time. And this is the point about the one tempo. In the position where you go queen b6, well, let me show you this one. We get the same thing, but this is a tempo ahead. The pawn goes, this one captures, bang, the queen is made just in time. And this should either be a draw or possibly black could even lose, depending how the pieces coordinate right. What a stunning game from both players. I hope you enjoyed this one. Do check out Go Chess using the link below and see another epic game. Have a look at the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.